Her voice caught when they called her name. Dozens of eyes turned. A single beat of silence, then chuckles. Too nervous to speak, someone whispered. She didn't answer. She just stood there, heart pounding, face flushed. But hours later, on the firing line, with nothing but her breath and the target ahead, she didn't flinch. 5 shots. 5 bullseyes. No words. No stutter. Just a stunned silence behind her. And a new record that still hasn't been broken. From which corner of the world are you witnessing this incredible moment today? If you believe that inner strength often hides behind quiet exteriors, consider subscribing for more stories that reveal how silence can sometimes speak louder than words. The autumn morning air at Fort Carson carried the crisp bite of Colorado altitude as Alpha Company assembled for their weekly personnel accountability formation. At 0630 hours, 3 rows of soldiers stood at attention on the weathered concrete pad outside the company headquarters, their breath visible in small clouds that dissipated quickly in the thin mountain air. First Sergeant Michael Torres moved through his clipboard with military precision, calling names in alphabetical order, while soldiers responded with the sharp, "Present, First Sergeant," that echoed across the formation area. "Johnson," Torres called, his voice carrying the authority developed through 18 years of military service that had taken him from private to senior enlisted leadership. "Present, First Sergeant," came the immediate response from the second row. "Martinez." "Present, First Sergeant." Torres continued down his roster, each name receiving the same crisp acknowledgement until he reached a particular entry that made him pause almost imperceptibly. "Parker Emma." The silence stretched for a beat too long. In the third row, 4th position from the left, Private First Class Emma Parker stood rigid at attention, her mouth opening and closing without producing sound. Her face, already pale from the morning cold, flushed deep red as 47 pairs of eyes turned toward her position in the formation. "Parker," Torres repeated, his tone carrying a mixture of patience and expectation. Emma's lips moved, but only a barely audible whisper emerged, "PP present." The stutter that had plagued her since childhood seemed amplified by the morning stillness and the weight of collective attention focused on her inability to perform a task that should have been automatic. A ripple of quiet laughter moved through portions of the formation, quickly suppressed, but not before Emma heard the whispered comments that followed her struggle with the simple response. "Too nervous to speak," someone muttered from the front row. "Maybe she should have stayed civilian," came another voice, barely audible, but clearly audible to Emma's position. First Sergeant Torres shot a sharp look toward the sources of commentary, his expression making clear that additional remarks would result in immediate corrective action. "Parker, Emma, present and accounted for," he said definitively, moving on with his roster while Emma remained frozen at attention, her humiliation burning hotter than embarrassment had any right to in the cold morning air. The remainder of the formation passed without incident, but Emma felt the weight of her public failures settling over her like a physical burden. In the 6 months since arriving at Fort Carson for her first duty assignment, she'd managed to complete her tasks competently and maintain the low profile that her introverted nature preferred. But moments like the morning's formation reminded everyone, including herself, that she didn't quite fit the mold of confident military bearing that the institution seemed to demand. As the formation dismissed and soldiers dispersed to their various duties, Emma walked toward the armory with the mechanical precision that came from weeks of routine. Her assignment as the company's designated marksman required daily maintenance of precision shooting equipment, a responsibility that suited her methodical nature and preference for working with technical systems rather than navigating complex social interactions. "Hey, Parker," called Specialist Rodriguez as he fell into step beside her, his tone carrying genuine concern rather than mockery. "You okay?" Torres can be intimidating, but he's not trying to give anyone a hard time. Emma nodded without making eye contact, her response limited to the minimal acknowledgement that military courtesy required. Rodriguez had been kind to her since her arrival at the unit, but explaining her stutter and social anxiety felt more complicated than simply enduring occasional embarrassment during formations. "You know," Rodriguez continued, apparently interpreting her silence as invitation to continue, "half the guys in this company couldn't hit the broadside of a barn if their lives depended on it. Different people have different strengths. The comment was meant as encouragement, but it highlighted the contradiction that defined Emma's military experience. On paper, she was one of the most qualified soldiers in Alpha Company. Her marksmanship scores during basic training had been exceptional, her technical knowledge of weapons systems was encyclopedic, and her attention to detail made her invaluable for equipment maintenance and inventory management. But her inability to project confidence during social interactions created the impression that she was weak or unsuitable for military service. The armory occupied a concrete building that had been constructed during the 1960s, its institutional architecture offering the same utilitarian functionality found on military installations worldwide. Emma used her access card to enter the secure facility, immediately feeling the familiar sense of calm that came from working in an environment where precision and methodical attention to detail were more important than social performance. The M24 sniper weapon system that served as her primary responsibility represented the pinnacle of military precision shooting technology. Emma approached the weapon with the reverence that other people might reserve for religious artifacts, understanding that proper maintenance and calibration could mean the difference between mission success and failure when the rifle was employed in combat operations. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she disassembled the weapon for cleaning, each component receiving meticulous attention that went beyond the standard procedures outlined in technical manuals. Emma had developed her own systematic approach to equipment maintenance, incorporating techniques learned from civilian competitive shooting and adapted to military requirements. "Parker," came a voice from the armory entrance, causing Emma to look up from her work to see Staff Sergeant Williams approaching with his characteristic purposeful stride. As the company's senior marksmanship instructor, Williams supervised all training related to precision shooting and had been responsible for Emma's integration into her current role. "Yes, Staff Sergeant," Emma replied, her voice steady when responding to direct military interaction in a controlled environment where her responsibilities were clearly defined. "I need you to prepare 5M24 systems for this afternoon's qualification testing," Williams said, consulting a clipboard that contained the day's training schedule. "We've got a group of soldiers from 2nd Platoon who need to complete their annual marksmanship requirements, and I want to ensure the equipment is properly zeroed before they attempt qualification." Emma nodded, understanding that the request represented both routine responsibility and implicit recognition of her competence with the weapons systems. "Staff Sergeant, what distance will they be shooting?" "Standard qualification course," Williams replied. 300 meters, 5-shot groups, with scores recorded for permanent record. Should be straightforward for anyone who's been paying attention during training. The mention of qualification testing sparked a familiar mixture of anticipation and anxiety in Emma's chest. Shooting qualifications represented the intersection of her greatest strength and her most persistent challenge. Her exceptional marksmanship ability combined with the social pressure of performing in front of others who would judge both her shooting and her overall suitability for military service. "Staff Sergeant," Emma said carefully, "will this be individual qualification or group testing?" Williams studied her face, noting the tension that accompanied her question. "Group testing. What?" "No reason, Staff Sergeant. I'll have the weapons prepared by 1300 hours. As Williams departed, Emma returned to her equipment preparation with increased focus, understanding that the afternoon would present another opportunity for her competence to be publicly measured against her. Social awkwardness. The soldiers from 2nd Platoon had witnessed her morning formation difficulties, and their expectations for her shooting performance would likely reflect their assumptions about her overall military capability. The hours between morning formation and afternoon qualification testing passed with characteristic military efficiency. Emma completed her armory duties with meticulous attention to detail, ensuring that each M24 system was properly cleaned, calibrated, and zeroed for optimal accuracy. Her preparation went beyond standard requirements, incorporating small adjustments that most soldiers wouldn't consider but that could improve shooting performance under varying conditions. At 1,245 hours, Emma loaded the prepared weapons into a transport cart and made her way to Range 7, the facility used for precision shooting training and qualification testing. The range occupied a valley between two ridgelines, providing natural protection from wind and excellent visibility to targets positioned at various distances up to 800 meters. Staff Sergeant Williams was already present when Emma arrived, supervising the setup of spotting scopes and ammunition distribution for the afternoon's qualification session. The soldiers from 2nd Platoon were assembled near the firing line, their conversation carrying the mixture of confidence and nervousness that preceded formal testing. "Parker," Williams called as Emma began unloading weapons from her cart. "I want you to demonstrate proper shooting position and breathing technique before the others begin their qualification attempts." The request hit Emma like a physical blow, though she worked to keep her reaction from showing on her face. Demonstrating shooting techniques meant performing in front of the group that had witnessed her morning embarrassment, transforming what should have been routine marksmanship into a public test of her credibility as a soldier. "Roger, Staff Sergeant," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the anxiety building in her chest. Private Morrison, one of the soldiers who had been present during the morning's formation incident, leaned toward his companion and spoke in a stage whisper that Emma could clearly hear. "This should be interesting. Let's see if she can shoot better than she can talk." The comment drew quiet laughter from several other soldiers, their amusement apparently deriving from the entertainment value of watching someone struggle with tasks that they considered routine. Emma felt her face flush with the same heat that had accompanied her morning formation difficulties, but she forced herself to focus on the mechanical aspects of rifle preparation rather than the social dynamics surrounding her performance. Williams positioned Emma at the center firing position, a location that provided optimal visibility for the soldiers who would observe her demonstration. The M24 system felt familiar and comfortable in her hands, its weight and balance representing thousands of hours of practice that had begun during her childhood on her grandfather's farm and continued through civilian competitive shooting before her military enlistment. "Demonstrate proper prone position," Williams instructed, his tone carrying the formal authority that characterized military instruction. "Show them how to establish a stable shooting platform using body position and equipment support." Emma lowered herself to the ground with fluid precision, her movements reflecting muscle memory developed through years of competitive shooting. Her body settled into the shooting position with natural efficiency, each component of her stance optimized for stability and comfort during extended shooting sessions. "Note how Parker positions her support hand," Williams explained to the observing soldiers. "The rifle rests in the palm rather than being gripped, allowing for natural point of aim without introducing tension that could affect accuracy." As Williams continued his instruction, Emma focused on the technical aspects of shooting preparation, using the familiar routine to manage her anxiety about performing in front of an audience. Her breathing settled into the rhythm that preceded serious shooting, each inhalation and exhalation controlled and purposeful. "Parker," Williams said, "demonstrate the shot sequence using dry fire technique. No ammunition yet. Just show them the trigger control and follow through." Emma aligned her sight picture with the 300-meter target, her cheeks settling against the rifle stock with practiced consistency. Her trigger finger moved with mechanical precision, applying steady pressure until the firing pin clicked on an empty chamber. The entire sequence flowed with natural efficiency that reflected thousands of repetitions under various conditions. "Outstanding demonstration," Williams acknowledged, though his praise was directed toward the observing soldiers rather than Emma personally. "That's the level of consistency you need to achieve if you want to qualify successfully." The transition from demonstration to live fire qualification marked a change in atmosphere that Emma could feel in the increased attention focused on her performance. The soldiers from 2nd Platoon arranged themselves behind the firing line where they could observe her shooting while waiting for their own turns at qualification. Williams handed Emma a magazine containing 5 rounds of match-grade ammunition, the precision cartridges representing the military's recognition that accurate shooting required quality components as well as proper technique. "Standard qualification course," he announced to the assembled group. 5 shots, scored for group size and accuracy. Passing score requires all 5 shots within the designated scoring rings. Emma inserted the magazine with practiced efficiency, her movements automatic despite the weight of collective observation. The rifle came to her shoulder with natural precision, her shooting position reflecting years of training that had emphasized consistency above all other considerations. The first shot surprised her with its clarity. Despite the pressure of public performance, her sight alignment was perfect, her trigger control smooth, and her follow-through consistent with competition-level standards. The satisfying crack of the rifle was followed by a moment of stillness as spotters checked the target through high-powered scopes. "Perfect center hit," announced Williams, his voice carrying a note of professional approval that hadn't been present during his earlier instruction. "Continue when ready." The second shot followed the same sequence, Emma's breathing controlled and her trigger finger moving with mechanical precision. Again, the spotter's call confirmed center target impact, building a pattern that began to capture the attention of the observing soldiers. By the third shot, the casual conversation among second platoon soldiers had ceased entirely, replaced by focused attention on Emma's shooting performance. The consistency of her shooting sequence and the precision of her target impacts were creating a demonstration that exceeded anything they had expected from someone who couldn't complete morning formation without embarrassment. The fourth shot maintained the same standard, Emma's shooting rhythm now fully established and her anxiety replaced by the focused concentration that had characterized her best competitive performances. The familiar weight of the rifle, the precise sight alignment, and the controlled trigger press had transported her away from social performance into the technical realm where her competence was unquestionable. 4 for 4, Williams announced, his professional composure beginning to show cracks of surprise. "Outstanding shooting, Parker." The fifth and final shot represented the completion of a shooting sequence that would either confirm Emma's competence or highlight her inability to perform under pressure. She settled into her final sight picture with the same methodical precision that had characterized the previous 4 shots, her breathing controlled and her trigger finger applying steady pressure until the rifle fired. The silence that followed the fifth shot seemed to stretch beyond normal time, 47 people waiting for the spotter's confirmation of target impact. When Williams finally spoke, his voice carried a mixture of professional assessment and genuine amazement. "Perfect group," he announced to the assembled soldiers. 5 shots within a 2-inch circle at 300 meters. That's not just qualification, that's a new company record. The declaration created a moment of stunned silence among the observing soldiers, their expectations completely overturned by Emma's shooting performance. The same person who had frozen during morning formation had just demonstrated marksmanship skills that exceeded anything in Alpha Company's recent history. Private Morrison, whose earlier comments had questioned Emma's military competence, stared at the target through his spotting scope as if visual confirmation might resolve the contradiction between his assumptions and the evidence before him. "Holy shit," he said quietly, his voice carrying genuine awe rather than mockery. "That's the best shooting I've ever seen." Other soldiers moved toward the target area to examine the group size personally, their conversations reflecting the kind of professional respect that exceptional performance commanded regardless of other considerations. Emma's shooting had transcended her social difficulties, establishing credibility that couldn't be questioned or dismissed. Staff Sergeant Williams approached Emma as she began clearing her rifle, his expression reflecting the reassessment that her performance had necessitated. "Parker, where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My grandfather taught me when I was 8, Emma replied, her voice steady now that the conversation focused on technical rather than social topics. "I competed in civilian matches through high school and college." Williams nodded, understanding beginning to dawn in his expression. "Have you considered trying out for the post-marksmanship team? We compete against other installations, and frankly, we could use someone with your level of ability." The suggestion opened possibilities that Emma hadn't considered since her military enlistment, opportunities to pursue competitive shooting within institutional frameworks that might accommodate her social challenges while utilizing her exceptional technical abilities. "I'll think about it, Staff Sergeant," Emma replied, though her tone suggested that she was already seriously considering the opportunity. As the qualification session continued with other soldiers attempting their own shooting tests, Emma found herself surrounded by second platoon members who wanted to discuss shooting techniques and ask questions about equipment and training methods. The conversations felt natural and comfortable, focused on technical topics where her knowledge was unquestionable rather than social performance where her anxiety created difficulties. "Parker," said Specialist Davis, one of the soldiers who had struggled with his own qualification attempt, "would you be willing to help me with my shooting position? I can't seem to get consistent groups." The request represented the kind of peer recognition that Emma had never experienced during her military service, acknowledgement that her competence in one area could benefit others regardless of her difficulties in different contexts. More significantly, it suggested that her morning formation struggles hadn't permanently defined how others viewed her military capability. Sure, Emma replied, settling beside Davis to examine his shooting position and offer suggestions for improvement. The most important thing is establishing a consistent natural point of aim. Let me show you how to adjust your body position. The impromptu coaching session that followed demonstrated Emma's ability to communicate effectively when discussing technical subjects that fell within her area of expertise. Her instruction was clear, patient, and methodical, helping Davis understand concepts that formal training had failed to convey successfully. That makes perfect sense, Davis said after implementing Emma's suggestions and achieving noticeably improved accuracy. You should be teaching marksmanship instead of just maintaining equipment. The comment planted a seed that would grow over the following weeks as Emma began to recognize that military service offered multiple paths for meaningful contribution, including opportunities that might accommodate her social challenges while utilizing her exceptional technical abilities. Staff Sergeant Williams had been observing Emma's informal instruction with professional interest, noting her ability to communicate complex technical concepts clearly and effectively when working within her area of expertise. Her teaching approach demonstrated patience and methodical thinking that could prove valuable in formal training environments. Parker, Williams said as the qualification session concluded and soldiers began cleaning equipment, I want you to prepare a presentation on advanced marksmanship techniques for next week's training session. Focus on the kind of precision shooting that you demonstrated today. The assignment represented recognition of Emma's competence and an opportunity to contribute to unit training in ways that went beyond routine equipment maintenance. More importantly, it suggested that her shooting performance had established credibility that could extend to other military responsibilities. Roger, Staff Sergeant, Emma replied, her voice carrying confidence that hadn't been present during morning formation. What specific topics would you like me to cover? The conversation that followed covered technical aspects of precision shooting, training methodologies, and equipment considerations that Emma could address based on her competitive background and demonstrated expertise. Williams' questions reflected genuine professional interest rather than routine assignment of busy work. As Emma returned to the armory to secure the weapons used during qualification testing, she reflected on the day's dramatic transformation from morning humiliation to afternoon recognition. Her shooting performance hadn't eliminated her social anxiety or resolved her difficulty with public speaking, but it had demonstrated that military service offered opportunities for different types of contribution and that exceptional competence in one area could outweigh limitations in others. The days following Emma's record-setting qualification performance brought subtle but significant changes in how other soldiers interacted with her. Her morning formation difficulties remained a source of anxiety, but they were now balanced by recognition of her exceptional marksmanship abilities and her value as a technical resource for unit training. Private Morrison approached her during evening equipment maintenance, his manner reflecting the respect that her shooting performance had earned rather than the dismissive attitude he'd displayed earlier. Parker, I've been thinking about what you said regarding natural point of aim, Morrison said, settling beside her workbench where she was performing routine maintenance on spotting scopes. Could you explain again how body position affects shooting consistency? The request led to a 30-minute discussion of shooting fundamentals, equipment selection, and training methods that demonstrated Emma's ability to communicate effectively when working within her area of expertise. Morrison's questions were thoughtful and specific, reflecting genuine interest in improving his own marksmanship rather than casual curiosity. You know, Morrison said as their conversation concluded, I owe you an apology for this morning. I made assumptions about your military capability based on one difficult moment rather than giving you a chance to demonstrate your actual strengths. Emma appreciated Morrison's acknowledgement, though she understood that her social challenges would continue to create difficulties regardless of her technical competence. Military service required both types of capability, and her exceptional shooting skills couldn't entirely compensate for her struggles with public performance. We all have different strengths, Emma replied, echoing the comment that Rodriguez had made earlier while adding her own understanding of how diverse capabilities could contribute to unit effectiveness. Over the following weeks, Emma's role within Alpha Company evolved beyond routine equipment maintenance to include informal marksmanship instruction and consultation on technical aspects of precision shooting. Her presentation on advanced shooting techniques had been well received, leading to additional teaching opportunities that utilized her expertise while accommodating her preference for structured rather than spontaneous interaction. Staff Sergeant Williams had nominated her for the post-marksmanship team, an opportunity that would allow her to compete against other military installations while representing Fort Carson in regional and national competitions. The prospect offered possibilities for military service that emphasized her strengths while providing structured environments where her social challenges would be less problematic. Parker, Williams said during one of their regular training planning sessions, "I've been in touch with the post-marksmanship coordinator. They're interested in having you try out for the team, and based on your qualification performance, I think you'd have an excellent chance of making the roster." The opportunity represented validation of Emma's military competence and recognition that exceptional ability in specialized areas could create paths for meaningful service that went beyond conventional expectations for soldier performance. "What would that involve, Staff Sergeant?" Emma asked, her interest clearly engaged despite her typical caution about new responsibilities that might involve social challenges. "Primarily competitive shooting against other installations," Williams explained. "Some travel for competitions, intensive training periods, and representing Fort Carson at regional and national events. It's prestigious duty that recognizes exceptional marksmanship ability." Emma considered the opportunity carefully, understanding that competitive shooting would provide structured environments where her technical competence could shine, while her social difficulties would be less problematic than in other military contexts. "I'd like to try out, Staff Sergeant," Emma said, her voice carrying conviction that had been developing since her qualification performance. The tryout process that followed confirmed Emma's exceptional shooting abilities while revealing additional capabilities that hadn't been apparent during routine unit training. Her analytical approach to equipment selection, her methodical preparation techniques, and her ability to maintain performance under competitive pressure impressed the marksmanship team coaches. "Parker," said Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, the team's senior coach, after watching Emma's tryout performance, "that's some of the most consistent shooting I've seen from anyone at this installation." "How long have you been competing?" "Since I was 12, Emma replied, her comfort with technical discussions allowing her to communicate clearly about her background and experience. "I competed through college before enlisting." The conversation that followed covered Emma's competitive history, her training methods, and her goals for military marksmanship competition. Rodriguez's questions were professional and specific, focusing on technical aspects of shooting rather than social performance or military bearing. "I'd like to offer you a position on the team," Rodriguez said after completing his assessment. "We compete in several events throughout the year, and I think you could help us improve our overall performance significantly." Emma's acceptance of the marksmanship team position marked a turning point in her military career, providing opportunities for meaningful contribution that emphasized her strengths while accommodating her challenges. The team environment offered structured social interaction focused on shared technical interests rather than general military socialization. Her first competition as a team member took place at Fort Benning, where military marksmanship teams from across the southeastern United States gathered for annual regional championships. Emma's performance exceeded expectations, setting new records in several events while helping Fort Carson achieve its best team placement in over a decade. "Outstanding shooting, Parker," said Major Williams, the installation commander who had traveled to observe the competition. "You're representing Fort Carson with distinction." The recognition felt different from the sympathy or accommodation that had characterized much of Emma's previous military experience. Her marksmanship achievements were being acknowledged on their own merits, without qualification or patronizing encouragement. As Emma continued to develop her role within the marksmanship team, she discovered that competitive shooting provided opportunities for leadership and mentorship that worked within her comfort zone while contributing meaningfully to military programs. Her technical expertise and analytical approach to training proved valuable for developing other shooters and improving team performance. "Parker," said Sergeant Rodriguez during a team training session. "I'd like you to work with Thompson on his shooting position. He's struggling with consistency, and I think your systematic approach to fundamentals could help him improve." The coaching assignment represented recognition of Emma's ability to transfer knowledge effectively when working within structured environments focused on technical subjects. Her instruction proved beneficial for Thompson and other team members who struggled with various aspects of competitive marksmanship. Over time, Emma's success with the marksmanship team influenced how she was perceived throughout Alpha Company and the broader Fort Carson community. Her exceptional shooting abilities and growing reputation as a technical expert provided credibility that extended beyond marksmanship to other military responsibilities. First Sergeant Torres, who had witnessed Emma's morning formation struggles, approached her after learning about her marksmanship achievements. His manner reflected the respect that exceptional performance commanded rather than the protective concern that had characterized earlier interactions. "Parker," Torres said, "I understand you've been setting records with the marksmanship team. That's outstanding representation for Alpha Company." "Thank you, First Sergeant," Emma replied, her voice steady when responding to recognition of her actual achievements rather than sympathy for her struggles. "I'd like you to consider taking on additional responsibilities related to weapons training for the company," Torres continued. "Your expertise could benefit all our soldiers, not just the marksmanship team." The opportunity represented expansion of Emma's military role in directions that utilized her strengths while contributing to unit effectiveness. Her technical competence had established credibility that created possibilities for meaningful service despite her ongoing social challenges. Years later, as Staff Sergeant Parker prepared for her next assignment with the Army Marksmanship Unit, she reflected on the trajectory that had begun with a humiliating moment during morning formation and evolved into recognition as one of the military's premier precision shooters. Her social anxiety hadn't disappeared, and she still struggled with public speaking and large group interactions. But military service had provided opportunities to contribute meaningfully through technical expertise and specialized capabilities that complemented rather than competed with other soldiers' strengths. The morning formation where she had frozen while responding to roll call remained a source of embarrassment, but it was now balanced by achievements that demonstrated her value to military service. Her record-setting qualification performance had become part of Fort Carson legend, inspiring other soldiers while establishing standards for excellence in precision marksmanship. Most importantly, Emma had learned that military service offered multiple paths for meaningful contribution, and that exceptional competence in specialized areas could create opportunities for service that honored both individual capabilities and institutional requirements. Her shooting achievements had opened doors that conventional military performance might not have provided, demonstrating that diversity of talents strengthened military organizations when properly recognized and utilized. The rifle range where she had set her first military record remained a place of significance, representing the moment when her hidden strengths became visible and her value to military service became undeniable. The targets she had engaged with 5 perfect shots served as reminders that extraordinary performance could emerge from unexpected sources when the right opportunities and circumstances aligned. As Emma continued her military career, she carried with her the understanding that true strength often manifested quietly, through technical competence and specialized expertise rather than conventional displays of military bearing. Her journey from struggling soldier to recognized expert demonstrated that institutions grew stronger when they found ways to utilize diverse talents rather than demanding conformity to narrow definitions of capability and performance.